All right, guys, welcome back to the Make or Break Show. We're hanging out with Craig Cowan today, calling in from Pittsburgh from his shop. I'm guessing in the middle of you're about to be leaving for a little while too. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
jumping on and chatting with me in the middle of all the crazy stuff you got going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Totally, man. Where so is that your shop behind you, like full out shop?
Yeah. So what we've got here is the bottom floor. We have 2 floors and a storage unit. And I think this is about 800 square feet. We make a lot of stuff in a small space. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
a hydraulic press and a big anvil and everything's backwards. Lots of tongs and I don't know. There's a lathe over. Oh, this is fun. Over there.
Yeah,
Oh, this is really fun.
yeah.
Right there. There's machinery behind me.
Yeah, and if you're just listening to the audio version, I'm sure you're having a blast. But there is a video that you guys can check out. There's a link in the bio. But so you said we. So how big of an operation do you have going on?
Well, like everyone, I say we to imply the company. The
Okay,
company is
gotcha.
me.
Gotcha,
I have
gotcha.
a lot of free labor. I got a lot of great helpers. The average person that works for me for free is a doctor or a lawyer and just wants to sweep my floor.
That's awesome. I
It's
say
pretty great.
I say the exact same thing. I'll say we like on Instagram or something, and my wife is like, "There is no other person. Like it's just you. Like, what are you talking about?" So
Well, I do get a lot of help. So there are a lot of people involved, and there are a lot of
cool.
people that show up on Instagram stories and whatnot. For instance, we as a shop showed up as 4 people to New York last
Oh,
week.
cool.
So, but it is just me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what do you guys mainly sell products? Kind of what's your business like?
So it's a little bit of everything, like
Okay.
everyone, it seems. I mostly make Damascus steel wedding rings. I
Okay.
also make and sell stainless steel Damascus. And then I also teach a lot of classes. And by a lot of classes, I mean, we'll probably hit 1,000 students later this year.
Oh, geez.
So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. The coolest thing I offer is that you can come make your own wedding ring. So I get couples and individuals that fly in from all over the country and all over the world now, and they sit down with us for a 14-hour day and go home with a wedding ring that they made.
That's crazy. So do you already have like the billets forged beforehand, or is that part of the
So
process
for
too?
that, we have the billet forged ahead of time. If you want to get it done in one day, if you want to come
Okay.
for 2 days, you can forge the billet from scratch.
Dude, that's crazy. I didn't know that. Like I knew you could buy them, but I didn't know you can make them.
Oh
That's
yeah,
really
yeah.
cool.
That's my favorite thing. I'm traveling a lot this month, and I get back, and then I have 5 people total back to back to back. So all making gold, I think, all gold lined rings. So that'll be a lot of fun.
That's wild. I had. Do you know Patrick Adair? Patrick
Yeah.
Adair, Brennan? He was the first one that I saw just making rings. And when he was talking about it, I'm like, that's a pretty good business because I'm imagining the materials aren't a ton compared to like some of the
Well,
other stuff you could be building.
one of the advantages I have is that I make the material.
Hmm.
So, I'm not buying anything other than just raw materials that we forge into the stainless Damascus. And then because we have a proprietary thing, you can't really get our ring anywhere
Yeah,
else. So it can't be, oh, this is the same material that everyone uses. It's ours.
that's cool.
And then we also don't strive to make things repeatable. We actually do the opposite. So every ring is forged individually.
That's cool.
So no two will ever be the same.
That's awesome. So I definitely want to get into the rings and how you started with it. But before that, how did you get into just blacksmithing in general? Or did you just start out making on another side of things?
Well, I always like my grandfather made a bunch of stuff, and I grew up in construction projects. When I was like 10, we took the roof off our house and added a second story. So I kind of grew up in projects. But
Yeah.
I started blacksmithing in high school with some buddies. Put it down for much of college, picked it up here and there. But really, the earliest thing I can trace it back to is I had a great jewelry program at our high school, at our public school. So I had an art teacher that offered a metals and jewelry class. And I took that in 10th grade, I think. And That's where I learned how to solder silver, and that's the skill set that I built an entire industry on.
That's wild. I didn't even know that was even an option. Like, I didn't know there's high schools that even taught something like that.
So we had like a different shop track,
Okay.
which I didn't take. You could take like a wood shop and metal shop and learn to weld and stuff. And those guys went to a Votech school, and I wasn't part of that. But one of the art class options was a jewelry class. And I learned how to hammer some textures and solder things and clean up metal. And I actually still have the ring I made in 10th grade, which is pretty cool.
Oh, really? That is pretty cool.
I do.
So did you say
then I went to college, and in college I took 2 jewelry classes just as electives.
Okay.
My degree's in environmental science, so between calculus and other hard classes, it was nice to go hit something with a hammer. And now I'm here.
Where'd you go to college?
Slippery Rock University.
Where's that?
It's about an hour north of Pittsburgh.
Okay, cool. So and you grew up in Pittsburgh as well?
Yep.
Gotcha. Did you go in, you said environmental science. What were you wanting to do?
Change the world. So I have sort of an interesting background in how I didn't end up going into environmental science. I did get my degree, and I didn't work an internship during the summers because I spent my summers sailing.
Okay.
I'm a boat captain, and
really?
I used to work on yachts. So I worked for some private families, and I got to travel around and work on big expensive boats and do some professional racing in the summers, and that paid for each year of college. And so I never did an internship. And then I got out of school, and I had already started making the rings, and I got an internship, and it was paying so little that I made more in the evenings making rings. So now I don't do that.
All right. So I definitely want to talk to you about sailing and boat racing. Are you talking like sailing when you talk about boat racing, like leaning off the back of the boats and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So I mostly sailed bigger boats than that.
Okay.
So our race boat was small like that, and we were very competitive in that. And then we had the family I worked for had a large cruising catamaran, and we'd go up and down the East Coast with that.
Okay.
For weeks at a time. And then after that, I got my captain's license and dealt with a much bigger, much more expensive boat.
Yeah. That's crazy. This is definitely going to sound ignorant because I'm from not where there's a ton of water around, but like I'm guessing Pittsburgh isn't like a mecca for sailing. I could be totally wrong.
No,
okay,
we don't have much. We don't have much for sailing, but so after school, I did 5 years giving tours of Pittsburgh, actually driving duck boats.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So I had to get my commercial driver's license, and I'd drive around on land, and then we'd drive in the water, and we do tours. And that's really what allowed my business to grow, is I had the winters off. So there's no boat stuff to do in the winters. So I did this, and one year I had to tell them I can't come back for 60-hour weeks. I can only do 30-hour weeks. And the next year I can only do 20-hour weeks. And before you know it, I just do this.
That's wild. What was the biggest boat that you captained?
Well, the most expensive was $12 million.
That works. Yeah.
It was 78 feet long, and it was a really elaborately built expedition trawler. So it was designed to go around the world, which it had done.
That's crazy. Is that like, do you get nervous when you're at that level, or have you done like so much stuff going into that you're just kind of like, all right, this is my job?
There's a reason I'm not in that industry anymore.
Okay.
That industry is it's tough. You know, you refer to someone as your owners, and you do that. You do whatever they want. And my last experience with that boat ended with the sheriff escorting the owner, or I was told the owner, my boss, off the boat because apparently we'd been stealing it. His family had sold it out from under him before he told me to leave with it. He was on board, and we started sinking, tied up in Chelsea piers, and I left.
Wow. Okay. That's a
So
that's a good
one
reason
of the
to live.
really
Yeah.
fun things about the yachting industry and whatnot is you really have to have a lot of interdisciplinary skills. And in that boat in particular, which was sort of a mechanical nightmare, they hired me specifically because of my mechanical skills. So
Gotcha.
I actually was hired to write a book on sort of how the boat worked,
Okay.
which in hindsight was so that they could steal it. Uh, but yeah, figuring out the layout of all the systems and stuff because the previous engineer had actually died. So no one really knew how it worked.
Yeah. So were systems and like kind of engineering, was that something you're kind of drawn to like growing up too?
I just like fixing stuff.
Okay.
When I was in like middle school and whatnot, I got into the nitro powered RC cars and I used to like rebuild lawnmowers and stuff like that. I've always liked engines. I've been restoring VW buses for a long time now. So,
cool.
that's how I learned to weld and whatnot. I just
Yeah.
keep getting cars that have giant holes in them and I put them back together.
Is that what you drove over the weekend?
Yeah.
Oh,
So I went up to the Catskills in my 1987 Synchro, so 4-wheel drive VW bus, Vanagon, and it was fun. Good trip.
That's cool. And it was Maker's Camp. What was like the official? Is that the official name of it? What do they call it?
Yeah, it's the Catskill Mountain Makers Camp.
Maker's Camp. Okay, gotcha. It feels like there were a ton of you guys that were at the event hanging out.
I think about 100 to 120.
Yeah, it looked really cool. I was very jealous watching all the stories.
It was a good time. You should have gone.
Yeah,
we'll see you next year.
That's what it sounds like. It's going to be a yearly thing.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
That's cool. All right, so you circled back. It sounds like to rings. Like, did you know that could be you can make a business off of that, or at least you could start making money off of that?
No. So the way I started doing rings specifically, I always had an interest in Damascus Steel, and my buddy and I one day just made some Damascus Steel, and we cut the block in half, and he made his half into a knife, and I didn't really like knives, and I wanted to make something cooler than that. And at the time, I had a ring that opened beer bottles, and I thought that was super cool. It was one of those cheap Chinese ones that comes with the case of beer sometimes.
Okay, yeah.
And so I thought, how can I make this out of this? And I didn't have very many tools, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I successfully did it. So having made that ring number one, which I still have, I posted pictures to my Facebook page, just my personal page, and a friend reached out and said, I want one.
That's cool.
And then there were two. And once there's two, there becomes three.
Yeah.
There's been more than that.
How long ago was that?
Probably 6 or 7 years ago now.
Okay. Yeah. So you said you didn't have many tools. Like how did you make a ring to start out?
The first one I hot punched and drifted to close to the right size. Then I used a Dremel, had to go buy a Dremel, to bore out the center to close to the right size.
Yeah.
And then the bottle opener mechanism was all carved, with a cutoff wheel and some files.
So real old school.
Yeah.
That's cool. And you said you still have it?
Yeah.
That's fun. How, once you had people starting to buy them, like, was there a point where you're like, I could actually build like a business around this?
Yeah. I mean, I started an Etsy page. Those were the days when people still bought things off Etsy. So, I did that, and that was great. And, I was selling some rings. It was a nice little side hustle. And then a good friend of mine from college said, I'm buying my ring from you, but can I come help make it? And I said, I don't see why not. So he came and helped me make it. And then he told a buddy, and his buddy wanted to come make it. And now that's the main thing I do.
How many people do you have come like during the year? Or has it kind of just always grown each year?
It grows every year, but okay. It's been over 100 total, just in the last 2 years.
They come into the shop
to come make rings, yeah.
And is it like a one-on-one thing?
Yep.
Or okay, gotcha. Yep. And it's like just a full day,
10 to 14 hour day. Yep.
That's wild. That's so cool. I never would have thought about like making my own ring. Like I can't think of anything that I have that is more like personal, or like anything I have that I would spend more money on. And so I was like, that's a great a great idea to get into. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and I've gotten really good at figuring out the process to be somewhat idiot proof, because I've had instances where someone was 10 hours into the ring and we're going on to some of the finishing stages and they cracked it in half. And then we start over.
Yeah.
And if they're from out of town, that's not much of an option. So we have some built-in redundancies now that work really well. Actually, we just did a ring with John Malecki for his YouTube channel. So he came out and made his wedding ring. He gets married next week. So congrats, John, depending on when you hear this.
That's okay. Yeah. So I remember seeing that video. I didn't make the connection, I guess, that you guys were doing. It was in your shop. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty cool. Did you know from the get-go, like Damascus was going to be your route? Because you mentioned that you also do like gold rings and other rings as well.
We do gold liners on the inside of the rings. Okay. But yeah, I mean, Damascus is what got me into rings, not the other way around.
And do you?
But then I had so when I started doing that, I was doing that with carbon Damascus, which is pretty much what everyone does, which is great for making a knife, but it's really bad for a ring. And after a lot of trial and error and finding out that it can actually poison people and cause major health issues, I had to solve that problem. So I had to come up with some creative ways to figure out how to make stainless Damascus, which not a lot of people do. So I'm pretty secretive on that, but it's great. We've figured it out.
That's cool. I never would have thought about that it's poisonous, but I guess that makes
so
sense.
it leaches nickel.
Okay.
15N20 steel, which is probably the most common steel used in most Damascus, is it's great for making a knife because it's hardenable and it's affordable and everything, but it has a lot of actively leaching nickel. And in the US, we don't have any particular regulations or laws that deal with that, but everywhere else they do. So there's a particular set of international laws that test for nickel, and we sent our rings out and they could never pass. So we had to come up with a solution for that, which we did.
When did you switch to stainless?
About 5 years ago.
Oh, so almost at the beginning, like you switched over.
Yeah, about a year in, I realized the problem. I ended up having to buy back a lot of those rings, so that they are not out there hurting people.
Right. How long did it take you to figure out the stainless process?
I'm still not sure we have.
So to where you could start selling it.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I was selling it, but we still have a pretty high failure rate, and that's one of the interesting things and one of the interesting costs that goes into it. It was only about a year or so ago that we got the stainless failure rate to below 50%.
Oh, geez. Okay.
So for 4 years, I was selling 30% of what I tried to make.
That's crazy. And would it fail just all along the process? Like, would you get, so even at the very end and you have to restart?
Yep.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. So we had a lot of issues with the metallurgy of it and had to learn a lot of lessons and have succeeded.
That's cool. What's like do you have any just crazy people that have bought rings or like made rings? Like have you had like any weird experiences in the shop or just fun experiences in the shop? Like someone get their hands on something?
I usually get to deal with the coolest people,
Okay, yeah.
I mean, people save up for this. This is their vacation and they're making something that they get to be proud of and have forever. And they just want their picture taken with every step of the process and they love it. But I have had someone who came in from out of town. It was a couple making rings, and at about 10 o'clock at night, we were just finishing things up, and the ring definitely 110% did not fit her finger.
Yeah.
And we start the day by them writing down their size. And she pulled up emails proving that was the size that her engagement ring was made to. And then her husband pulled up emails, seeing that he got it resized 2 sizes.
Oh, geez.
So we had to start over.
That sucks. That sucks. Do people get emotional? Like when they're in the process of making it?
Yeah,
like the
I
first time
get
they
a
put it
lot
on?
of big burly guys that cry. So the coolest part of the process is that because we forge each one individually, we don't really fully know what the pattern is going to look like until almost the very end.
Uh-huh.
So there's probably about a 6-hour period where we don't really see it.
Yeah.
And we're working on it for that period of time, and then we put it in an acid which eats away at one of the metals and not the other, and we pull it out, and that's when the guys cry.
That's cool. That's really cool. Is it mostly rings for guys? Like
it's mostly rings for guys. I do get some couples, but I would say that around 70% of my market is men.
Yeah, because it's not like, is it something you could put a diamond in? Like, is that like
we don't, but there's always ways to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I have done that kind of stuff, but I've sort of just settled on there's enough demand to stick to a specific product.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It gets way too expensive to deviate from that too much.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. All right, so I don't know much about, I know a little bit about Damascus, and I definitely don't know much about rings. And for people that are listening that don't, like kind of walk us through the process. You don't have to get into like all the stainless stuff.
Yeah, that's no problem.
So
basically we're going to take 2 dissimilar metals, 2 metals with different physical properties, and we're going to stack them up in an alternating layers. We do about 50 layers, and then we heat that up real hot and we forge weld it together. Now that forge welding process is kind of an interesting thing. There's a small window of opportunity because the more dissimilar the metals, the more contrast you're going to show later so that you'll see the pattern. But the more dissimilar the metals, the less likely they want to stick together.
Right.
So I always tell people it's like a square peg, round hole type situation. But if you get the square peg to the exact right size, it'll fit in the round hole.
Right. Okay.
So finding the 2 metals that will work together and getting it to exactly the right temperature and specific conditions allows you to forge that all into one solid block of material. And then how you manipulate those layers, how you grind and remove material results in very unique patterns. The Japanese terminology would be mokumegane, meaning metal wood. So it looks like wood, but it's metal.
That's cool. And that's Damascus specifically?
Yeah, Damascus steel is really not the right term. Pattern welded steel is.
Right.
And pattern welded steel is just a modern term for mokumegane.
Gotcha. Which is just 2 different types of metal.
2 different types of metal. Yep.
Cool. So can you get multiple rings out of one billet?
Yeah. So when we make a billet, which looks like that, it's about 10 inches long. This will make 7 rings, I think.
Okay.
And so then we cut that into individual pieces that look like that. So a little square nugget. And then we forge those individual pieces into a round object like that. And then we take that round object, we put it on the lathe. The lathe allows us to add a bit of precision. Yeah. And we make it to whatever we need it to be. And then we add some... Oh, what's that?
Sorry, how do you forge it to get it around?
We have a hydraulic press, and we have 2 of them. And then we use hammers.
Gotcha, you just go
hammers
around.
And anvils. Yep.
Yeah, loud.
If you hit the corners, it's really easy to take a 4-sided object and turn it into an 8-sided object.
Right.
So you just have to balance it on the corner and hit 2 alternating corners, and you'll end up with 8 sides. And 8 sides is almost round, so it's pretty easy to get it round enough.
Yeah. How long does it take to go from like you've got 2 pieces of metal to you've got something on the lathe?
About half the day.
Okay. Gotcha.
But everyone who comes, they forge out at least 2 rings.
Okay.
So they actually forge, they go through the whole process twice so that basically it ends up being, I do a demo ring so that they get to see the whole process. Then they get to do it twice. I want to be as hands-off as possible. I want them to truly be able to say, I made this. Yeah. So I'm going to teach them on a different ring. Then they're going to do it twice. Then we'll machine both of those, and they'll get to pick. They'll see the pattern then and get to say, "Hey, I like that ring," or "I like that ring." And then whichever one is their plan B is the one I demo on, so that every process from that point on they get to see, and I don't do.
Okay,
I don't
cool.
touch their ring. They get to do it.
So the changes just in the patterns, is it just the way that it's welded together? Like just the way the metals are made up? Like why is there like differences or so wide differences in the final product?
I didn't think we'd be talking about the patterning process, or I would have brought out my my clay.
Sorry.
So I've got some really awesome visuals for this, and I just taught a class on this at the Makers Camp, and
Okay.
let's see if I can find some more. Basically, if you have these two different layers, and you remove material somewhere along the process, it's going to change the pattern. And I just found something. Let me find a... Come on, like my desk isn't covered in razor blades. That's ridiculous. There's definitely... I don't know. It was going to be cool. I would have showed you something cool.
No, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. And so you just vary when you remove or how much you remove along the process?
So how you... Can we pause this?
We can totally pause it, yeah. Or we could just
Okay,
totally skip this too if you want.
Yeah, pause it. I will be right back because I have I have a whole demonstration.
Okay, cool.
In a box upstairs. Give me one second.
All right.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, give me 1 second. That's Wake and Make brand coffee. There's coffee in there.
It keeps you awake late at night.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so razor blade, pocket of clay. So we make something like this to visualize it. So this is two different colors of clay. And by doing this in clay, we can show you how we develop the patterns really easily just using our hands. And we can use our hands later in the process, but when you use your hands with 2300 degree metal, you only get to do it once. So
right.
It's easier to do this at room temperature with clay. So we've got our layers. We cut a piece off. And when we do make a ring, people get to see this. So I get to show them, how we do this. So we have our layers here, and you were asking how we make it round. Essentially, all you have to do is hit the corners. Right? And now we've got a basically round object.
Right.
But our pattern is very straight. We have a bunch of straight lines there. And we want to change that. So depending on what we do, we can cut something away. I'm going to use a razor blade, but imagine an angle grinder. And if I cut a groove in there like that, across it at an angle, when I forge that back down to make it all level,
yeah,
it's going to change the line. So essentially what we're doing is we're removing material in selective ways so that it causes waves and some unique experiences within the pattern of the material. So we like to say adding funk.
Right.
And then we hit it with a sledgehammer a couple times. We have a big sign that says failure is absolutely an option. We want to mess this thing up. Our goal is to take away the straight lines.
Right. Is like how many cuts? Like, are you talking like you do 5 or you do like multiples of 10 or what's that like? Or does it
It
depend?
depends.
Okay.
It depends on how comfortable they are with an angle grinder and stuff like that.
Right.
But we just grind into it. We take a cutting wheel and a grinding wheel and just remove materials. There's some
Gotcha.
very easy patterns we can do. There's some very easy ways we can manipulate the pattern, and there's some more involved ways. And that's what's really cool too is I get people that vary in experience from. I'll get someone who's never picked up a tool at all in their life. They've never done anything.
Yeah.
To like I had a millwright from Canada that builds hydroelectric power plants. That guy knows how to use every tool in my shop better than I do.
Right. Right.
And he actually was teaching me things like the whole time. It was awesome.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
And so when you have like more experienced folks like that, is it just that they don't know the process or
they don't know
have
the
tools
process,
or,
but
okay.
it's way easier for me when they're confident with an angle grinder, when
Right.
they've seen a lathe before, stuff like that. So, I can take it someone with no experience, but what's really cool is when they have it. The joke I like to tell people is some days I have to go to work,
Right.
but some days I really just I have fun. I hang out with people that know what they're doing, and I guide them along the way.
That's cool. All right, so going back to the process, you've got it on the lathe, and is it pretty much like the actual shaping of it from there on is on the lathe?
Yeah. So we used to do it by hand with the belt sander, and the reality of it is it took about 3 times as long. It was about 3 times less precise, and it was way harder to do. So once we made the pivot towards people actually getting to come do this and get this done in a day, people can argue that it's not as handmade, but if you have a better tool, you use the better tool.
Right.
And what a lathe does is it makes things round.
Yeah.
That's all it does. And it does that well.
Yeah.
So if that tool exists, why wouldn't we use it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're also not sticking metal into a fire out in the backyard and then whacking it with like a stick or something to get it down into the belt and everything. So,
using a wooden hammer is not as good as a metal hammer.
Right.
And a metal hammer is not as good as a hydraulic press.
Right.
But, everyone can criticize all they want that it's not handmade because I didn't do it with a wooden hammer.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's the finishing process like?
So then we sit down at a bench and we put liners in all of our rings. We don't have to. Our material can touch the skin, but most of our rings get either a sterling silver or a 14-karat gold liner. We can do yellow, white, palladium white gold, or rose gold. And that starts as a sheet. We fold it up into a D shape, and then they solder it. So I get to teach them how to solder, which is super cool. Jewelry soldering is a whimsically different process than electrical or plumbing soldering.
Okay.
The temperatures are very extreme, and the margin for error is very, very low. So it's very easy to melt the entire thing.
Yeah.
And so they get to learn to do that, and they get to have a couple of tries at that because they usually screw that up at least once. And they get to solder that, and then they hammer it into place and expand it in, and then there's a whole bunch of hand sanding and file work and sitting around making it perfect.
That's cool. I had no clue like how gold or anything like that got onto other metal. Like this is the first time I've even heard of soldering on the furniture, or not on the furniture, on the jewelry side of things. So that's wild. Is it literally like, is there solder or is the solder?
So there's solder.
Metal?
So
okay.
Solder is you always want to use the solder alloy that is closest to the parent alloy that you're working with. So let's just pretend for a second we were working with pure gold. If we were working with pure gold, we would want a solder that is 99.7% gold.
Right.
And the reason for that is we need it to melt at a lower temperature than the pure gold so that it can work as a solder. It can actually melt in there and hold it together. But we also want it to be so close to the pure gold that once we're all said and done, we don't see that seam.
Got it. Okay.
So the solders that are closest to the parent alloy are going to look better in the end, but they're going to be harder to work with because in some of these cases, we're using a 3,000 degree torch to melt something at 1,500 degrees onto something that melts at 1,507 degrees.
Good gosh.
It's a small margin.
Yeah, and you're in a tiny space.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
It's a very small torch. It's like a felt tip pen.
That's cool. That's really cool. And so then just lots of buffing, polishing, you said like hand filing, all that kind of stuff to get
a lot of hand sanding. Yeah. So what's really cool too is I have to remind people that jewelry is really the quest for making things perfect, but everyone knows that that's not possible. So it's really fun because we start the day with an 8-pound sledgehammer and we end the day with a 2-ounce hammer. So we're putting on a different proverbial hat. Right. In the beginning, we're fine with a 1/4-inch deep gouge, and in the end, we're looking through a microscope at a little scratch.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part of the process?
My favorite part is probably getting to see it come out of the acid because that's when you really see what you've done.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
It sounds really cool. So you, I won't ask you anymore. Making.
Hey, you can ask me whatever.
Rings. It sounds like you're re-giving the class you just gave, which I'm sure you've done many times.
Oh no, I do this every day. So whatever you got.
Cool. That's cool. So on the business side of things, then do you just see yourself just growing, just in the number of rings and the number of people in your shop building and teaching, that kind of stuff? Is that kind of the direction you see yourself going?
Yeah, the next move is going to be to get someone to do all of the stuff that I don't want to do.
Right.
You know, that's sort of how everyone's is. But the reality of it is it would be very hard to replace me. I can't really bring in another instructor to instruct this process because the average person that's coming to come make a ring has been following for actually quite a long time. I get a lot of people that have followed me on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook for 4 years before they came and made a ring. Sometimes they knew me before they knew their fiance.
That's
so funny. Yeah. So it wouldn't be fair to them to have someone else come teach their class. So I'm going to try to find someone that can do some of the prep and some of the back end stuff. But I'm looking to get a bigger space and maybe expand the classes a little bit. The fun problem I have from a business perspective right now is that the average person who wants to come make a ring wants to make it on a Saturday. And there are 52 Saturdays a year, and I would like to work maybe 50 of them at most. So when 100 people ask to come make rings, you have a problem.
Right.
And I'm not doing anything on a Wednesday. So it's been very hard trying to get people to move to the middle of the week. And that's actually a real scalability issue. It's fun.
So do you like the in-person teaching?
Yeah, that's my favorite. I love getting to help someone make getting to help someone make something that it is, so quintessentially theirs is very empowering.
Right.
In a lot of these instances, these people have never used any tools and they had their doubts that they'd pull it off, and they pull off something amazing that they're going to have represent them forever. And I get to be a part of that.
That's cool. Do you guys do other products or teach other classes around different products?
Yeah, so we do a intro to welding class that we sum up as the skills you need to fix your lawnmower.
Okay.
So very, very basic welding. How to buy a welder, how to not burn down your house. We do a nice couples date night metal rose class that people like. And then our biggest product is bottle openers. I produce a couple thousand of them a year, and then we have hundreds of students.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's fully ridiculous. There's a insatiable demand for bottle openers.
Yeah. And so it seems like recently, or at least you said this month, it sounds like you're traveling a ton. Is that also picking up, just like the greater community around blacksmithing and making, like, is that something you just seen growing more and you've been involved with more?
Yeah, I do. Me and my team of people do a few demos at various places every year. I try to do a couple of art shows every year because I've got to, show myself off to the community a little bit so that I can get people to come make stuff. And then I sort of found the maker community as it is. Just last year, I went to Workbench Con on a whim, and I learned a lot there. And then I went to Spring Make, and then the Catskill Mountain Makers Camp. And I think I've sort of ingratiated myself in the community pretty well. So I'm going to be around forever.
How did you hear about Workbench Con?
I listened to a podcast put on by two particular individuals that talk about making profits.
Got it. Yeah. Did you know Maleki before that?
No. Nope.
Okay.
I met him at Workbench Con.
That's funny. You guys are just right down the road.
Yep. Yep. Right down the road.
How did you hear about the podcast?
Which one?
Made for Profit.
Podcast?
Sorry.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I think someone told me about it.
Okay.
But I don't know. One of the really fun things I have with the number of students I have come through is they teach me a lot.
Yeah.
And I also end up with this huge list of resources. I wanted to start playing around with some fairly unique materials in the near future, some titanium, zirconium, and then particularly niobium. Okay. And it turns out the world's largest distributor of niobium is in Pittsburgh, and I've had the CEO come take a class.
That's cool.
So, this is something I wanted to do. And then one day I mentioned it to someone and he said, I'm the guy. How much do you want?
Right. So what is that?
It is a rare material. It's a metal used in superconducting magnets. So,
okay.
I have some pieces from the CERN Large Hadron Collider.
Yeah.
And people make rings out of it, but I want to make stuff out of the actual niobium, not the superconductor.
Gotcha. That'd be cool just to have a ring from the freaking super, or from the collider. That's wild.
Yeah.
So
I had a guy give me 14 feet of titanium bar the other day.
That's crazy.
I have had 3 anvils dropped off here like a baby in a basket. I have no idea who dropped them off.
Love that. Just please take the anvil. Oh, and so speaking of that, so where did the name Barefoot Forge come from?
Oh, I don't wear shoes. I hate shoes.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I really hate shoes. I've always hated shoes. I wear sandals in the shop most of the time. I have some steel-toed boots I put on when I'm moving heavy equipment.
Right.
But otherwise, unless it's someone else's shop, which I'm very respectful of, you're not going to see me in shoes.
That's what I thought. It was a joke, or at least when I first met you at Spring Make, I was like, I guess he's just he's playing on the fact that he's like dealing with hot, heavy stuff and he doesn't wear shoes. But
nope, you saw me in boots at Spring Make because it was a requirement.
That's really funny. Well, come in. Well, I don't want to take a ton of your time. I know you.
You got as much of it as you want. Let's keep talking.
To do crazy stuff. So what are you doing? You said you're flying out, hanging out with Ann of all trades. Is that right? Is it like a secret project?
Yeah.
Are you able to talk about it?
I think we're allowed to talk about it. We just haven't, at all.
Yeah.
Ann and I talk a lot, and about a month ago, we came up with the idea of getting together and making something, and found some dates and locked them down, and then sort of just really haven't planned anything. So you're
just going out, yeah.
Yeah. I think we're making a Damascus Steel wood chisel. Because I made one of those. I don't know if you saw it at Spring Make. I brought it out and
yeah, I think I did.
I did a giveaway with that, and so I'm going to teach her how to forge one of those, and she's going to teach me the woodworking side of things. I don't work with wood, so it'll be entertaining.
That's cool. So you don't do any woodworking? It's all pretty much metal.
I mean, I don't think of myself as a woodworker.
Gotcha.
I built a river table, and at Spring Make, I built a 2x4.
That was funny. I was like, what is this guy doing? But it was
I put a
it
lot
was
of
pretty
effort
hilarious.
into that 2x4.
You did, and it looked amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. It got help from like a lot of the big people in the woodworking community. Like there's a lot of people who can associate their name with that 2x4.
Yeah. Do you still have that?
Yeah, but I think I've sold that.
Really? Okay. That's another product you need to get into selling, just selling 2x4s. Or...
Yeah, there's an insatiable demand for very exotic high-end 2x4s.
What was that? What was that made out of?
I think it's maple, walnut, and I don't know what the other one is. It's just what I found, but
yeah, just a bunch of
the guys that were putting on that event were not so thrilled initially that I was taking large walnut boards and ripping them into a 2x4.
Right.
It was, and so we actually started on a second 2x4 there that is far more elaborate. It's a herringbone, like chevron style.
Oh, cool.
Out of exotic woods, but I didn't finish that. I have it. I just need to get some wood shop time.
Yeah.
Someone needs to give me a saw stop table saw so that I can finish my 2x4.
You're putting it out there, and so it'll just show up.
I think that's how that works.
Yeah, that is how it works. Have you done any other like collaborations or any projects with other folks?
I just did that thing with John Malecki. He came and made his wedding ring, and that was really good for my exposure. And I'm very appreciative of John in that regard, and it was a lot of fun. I've known Sam for longer than I've known John, so that's kind of cool. And then I work with a lot of local jewelers. I have rings in a few different stores, and then I sell stainless Damascus to several different individuals that make rings out of it as well. My passion is for making very, very stupid things that are wildly elaborate out of wildly expensive material. So, like all the knobs on my lathe are stainless Damascus with rose gold inlays and stuff like that. I'm hoping to make a broom handle out of some ivory I acquired. I think we can make a $10 or $15, $20,000 broom handle. That'll be cool.
I love it. I mean, that would get quite a few views if you're making videos around that stuff. People love just the most ridiculous stuff like that. So,
yeah, I don't know if you saw at Spring Make, I brought my raptor claw and my shark teeth. I make a lot of Damascus Steel shark teeth every year.
Yeah, I've seen those on your website too, right? Do you sell those?
Yeah.
Okay.
Weirdly enough, Shark Week is bigger for me than Christmas every year. So
that's awesome.
I always tell people the story behind that is that I'd done my research on events and hashtags, and at the time, hashtag Shark Week was one of the biggest. So it was crazy to me that people prep for Christmas and people prep for these events, and no one was prepping for Shark Week.
Yeah.
So I just made some stuff for Shark Week, and people loved it. I mean, I sell $6,000 shark teeth.
That's how big?
Those ones are like the size of your hand.
That's crazy. That first off, that someone would want that, but that's
I've
also
sold
for you.
Several.
So, yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, are they just like super eclectic people, or do you even know them very well?
So the one guy that bought two of them, I didn't. He just contacted me through Instagram, and I really didn't believe him. He was like, would you do a deal on the two that you have? And I said, yeah. And I gave him a number, and he said, where can I PayPal it to? And 15 minutes later, I heard that little ding on my computer, and I looked up his name, and his family had recently inherited like $1 billion.
That's wild.
And he runs like a nonprofit for sharks.
That's crazy. That's really cool.
So, yeah, I find the weirdest people. I mean, I've been contacted by plenty of celebrity people via Instagram with interest in rings.
Yeah,
there's a lot of, everyone's connected in such a unique way now, and the resources we have it's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, we met around a table and barely had a discussion. I remember that you'd just gotten away because you just had a kid and something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was like 2
and
months later.
you were
Yeah.
with that one other guy.
Yeah.
He was tall guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, we were. I think we had lunch.
Yeah. Around that one
And
table.
yeah, and now here we are talking 6 months later. So
That's cool. Well, man,
the internet's crazy.
it is very, very crazy. And people are listening to the conversation eventually. But well, man, I appreciate your time in chatting. It's really cool to get more into what you're actually making. It'll be cool to see what your next shark tooth project's going to be that you're going to get to sell for lots and lots of money. But for people that want to check out your stuff, is that the best place to check it out?
Instagram's good. Facebook's good. YouTube's good. It's the Barefoot Forge on all of those.
That's cool. Well, man, thank you so much for chatting. It's a blast.
Yeah, same. Thanks for having me. It was a great honor. I looked at your podcast and I'm up there now with a bunch of real idols of mine. So it's pretty cool.
It's cool.